Hello and welcome to episode 224 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm James Whittingham. What a show we have for you this week. It's jam-packed for the summer. This week, China's Xpeng Motors will offer its version of full self-driving on all Chinese roads this month. No word yet on any hot takes the CEO has on transgendered people.
A new solar hat is now available to order. The solar panels on the brim are enough to charge your phone. Or you can buy a Clean Energy Show hat and just charge your phone before you leave the damn house.
I checked, and one Canadian EV charging network is still almost completely broken after 3 or 4 years of operation. It's almost like an oil company owns the network. Wait, it is an oil company that owns the network.
A new study suggests that wildfire smoke may increase the risk of dementia. As we struggle with more and more smoke here at the Clean Energy Show headquarters, something, I like bananas. Where's my pony? I lost my pony. Wait, are we recording a podcast?
Not really. All that and more in this edition of the Clean Energy Show. And also this week, Hertz tries to discourage one of our loyal listeners from renting an EV, and a look at what's really happening in the EV market, of course, the lightning round, and a whole lot more.
Yeah, so I'm sick this week. I don't know how I sound. I'm all stuffed up. I got a cold. That's all that happened to me this week.
It's just a plain cold?
Just a plain cold, yeah.
Nothing fancy? Because my partner is sick with a mysterious illness that is not... It's not contagious because she's had it for like a month and none of us got it. So
that's not good.
It's just weird. I don't know if it's long COVID or what, but the doctors keep sending her home saying it's a virus. They take weeks sometimes, just get over it. But she's not happy, and she's, wrecked her vacation, and now she's got to go back to work today and feeling sick. So I don't know what it is, but the rest of us are healthy. But so, yeah, this is hot off the press. They've just picked a vice presidential nominee for vice president for the Democratic ticket. And I'm wondering who Tim Walz is. Well, he's pro-EV, according to the facts that have come into the headquarters here without pushing any mandates. He is pro-EVs. He's established stricter emission standards in Minnesota. He's the governor of Minnesota, if you don't know. And he's worked to build more charging infrastructure, which is good because you just went through there a couple times recently and needed that infrastructure.
Yeah, not so great for EVs in Minnesota, not that many on the roads. So, maybe he hasn't done enough yet, but if he's pro-EV, that's good.
And he was helping schools get electric buses. So I just thought I would mention that. And I'd also wanted to mention that Donald Trump has for months denigrated electric vehicles. You may have heard, you may not have heard because you're with your news blackout, Brian.
I'm trying to stay out of it. This is, the election's not till November. I need to preserve my sanity as much as possible.
Well, he's been arguing that their supporters should rot in hell. That is, the supporters of electric cars, that's you and I, should rot in hell, and that assisting the nascent industry is lunacy. But he now appears to have somewhat shifted his view, thanks to the support of Elon Musk, the world's richest person for now. I think that'll change pretty soon. He says, I'm for electric cars. I have to be because Elon endorsed me very strongly, he said on the weekend, and told supporters, actually it was at a rally in Georgia and Atlanta on Saturday. So, maybe it's a good thing Elon's supporting him. But it's just a total about face just because he threw some, billions of dollars. I don't know how much money, $15 million a month or something. He's what
we used to call a fringe candidate, but he's no longer a fringe candidate.
So, Brian, as you know, at the end of this month, I am once again taking my EV on the road for a day-long trip to get to a wedding in Calgary. And I'm comparing, because I did the same trip last year and beyond, what has changed. And I wanted things to change because, the government in Canada is going to change to a right-wing government, and there's not going to be any support for anything anymore. They have to get this infrastructure in place. And I was looking at Petro Canada because, I was some of these places where I have to charge, all three brands of chargers are down. It's like I could be completely hooped on this thing. I probably wouldn't have got the Tesla adapter yet, but even if Musk hadn't fired the charging team, because Ford is just slowly starting to get theirs, I think now. So we would have been next maybe after Rivian. But that would have solved the problem, like especially if it had plug and charge capabilities like the Flow network does for me. I could have I just would have used the Chisel network and, screw everything else. Like,
so you did this trip last year, but it looks like it's going to be worse than it was last year, and not better. Potentially,
yeah, it could potentially. That's right. It could potentially be worse because some of these places are not working now. The joke in Canada is Petro Canada, which is owned by Suncor, which owns some of the biggest oil sands operations, or tar sands. It's the worst oil company that you would want when it comes to emissions and the way they get them and the way they lobby. They own this network, and it is crappy. They have 55 locations. So basically what they did is made a coast to coast, east coast to west coast. We have a northern coast here in Canada along the Trans-Canada Highway, basically locations at their gas stations, which they have gas stations everywhere. Only 1 in 10 of those 55 stations approximately is working reliably. Only 1 in 10.
Wow.
And that's right now. It's high tourist season, high usage. People use them the most when they're on road trips, not when they're in the city. So officially under repair are 18, having a plug share score of 10, 6. And if you don't have a plug share score of 10, it gets dicey because that means somebody had a problem recently. So yeah, there was 4 that had a score of 9 that you might consider going to, and 1 with a score of 8. But mostly 9 out of 10 of them weren't working reliably. You wouldn't waste your time going to them. One of the issues here that doesn't affect me, and I wouldn't go to these stations anyway, because they charge up to 350 kilowatts, I think. So these are some of the rare fast chargers. These guys and Electrify Canada, which is the Electrify America Volkswagen version of Canada. So yeah, those 2 networks is what you would go to if you had a Hyundai Ioniq 5 or a Kia, any of the fast charging Kia models, for example, or Porsche. If you were lucky enough to have a Porsche, there's lots of cars that can charge better than what a lot of these stations offer, which is only like 100 kilowatts and sometimes even 50. But even so, the 50 kilowatt ones are welcome. And so, yeah, the co-op gas stations in Western Canada are replacing a couple of their chargers. I noticed that, one of the ways that you can go to your cottage is through a town of Whitewood. Both those third-party chargers were down, both of them.
Wow.
And one for months, like February, like Valentine's Day. Like, it's bad. It's just terrible. And the thing that, as I've mentioned before, has changed is a lot of the dealerships have got chargers, but a lot of those are just 50 kilowatts and they're just one charger. And sometimes they're not networked, so you can't see if they're available or not. And, you like to go to a charging station that has a few chargers available and is near, a bathroom and food and things that you can do while you're charging, especially if you have a car that takes probably, 45 to an hour at least every stop, which is what my car does, maybe even longer in some cases. So, yeah. The good news, Brian, is that Electrified Canada is not the disaster that it used to be. And that has a reputation. As I looked at it, and it's doing very well. It has 40 locations in Canada, with one coming soon. And 60% of them had a score of 10, and a few more had a score of 9, and most of them were working. I didn't see one that was officially under repair, so that's really good news.
Yeah, I guess they're typically the newest ones. Petro Canada was really early into this. I was so excited when those opened. It was a few years ago now, and it's like, oh, this is amazing. We're finally getting some, fast chargers in Canada. Petro Canada unveiled them at a lot of their gas stations, but they were in so early that I guess they had never figured out how to make them in a way. I
remember watching the first YouTube videos that didn't work then, and they still don't work.
Yeah,
and
they still don't work.
It's, I don't know. It's got to be an embarrassment to the company, to the brand, but maybe not. I don't know. I wish they would get their crap together and replace those chargers. That's what Co-op is doing. They've had problems, and they're just flat out replacing the chargers now. I don't know what the issue is. Maybe sometimes it's been parts. They've complained about things like that. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is Alberta the province that I'm going to that has all the oil, I'm surprised to learn that their air conditioner adoption there is only 37% of Albertan households have some type of air conditioning. I was really surprised by that, because even next door here, it's 75%, which is a lot different. And even then, they've gone up like 9% in the last 8-9 years. So it's rising fast because of climate change.
Yeah, I guess it's a little bit cooler there in Alberta. They have more, they're closer to the west coast.
Like Calgary has quite a high elevation that sports teams don't even want to play there because they'd have, it's like Denver. So it probably gets pretty cool at night. Yeah, my brother-in-law was saying you can't even have a garden there because the season's so short. You get frost early. So yeah, he wanted to go somewhere when he was choosing a new location that he could have a garden. So yeah, and Manitoba's 90%. So, but yeah, Alberta's different. I mean, they just got the airport was closed because they had so much hail yesterday. That's a place where Alberta and Calgary, they actually seed the clouds so that the insurance companies have had enough of all this hail. And it's mostly in the last 10, 15 years that this has happened. So now they're seeding the clouds with multiple planes from the insurance industry whenever a hailstorm comes up.
Yeah, to try and disrupt the cycle and stop these gigantic hailstones.
Yeah. And they were golf ball size, although they were warning about baseball size. And that, a city of, 1.5 million people or something, that causes a lot of insurance damage. Like, we had a hailstorm here a few years ago, and it's like swaths of the city had all their vinyl siding broken. So that's a huge expense for the insurance industry.
Yeah, and as I like to point out, one of the reasons to get air conditioning in the 21st century is the air quality. I mean, that's probably what's driving the number going up in Alberta. It's not the heat so much, although it is getting hotter. You want to close the windows and keep out the forest fire smoke,
which is a bloody shame.
Gotten to hundreds of hours a year of smoke. It's bad.
Yeah, we've been lucky to have a stretch here of not having smoke. The sky has been smoky, but it's not been terrible. But yeah, closing the doors is a terrible thing, and having to spend money on air conditioning, which I don't want to. Like, I don't have a lot of extra cash, so turning on that air conditioner just for smoke seems like a ripoff. When you beat the heat, sure, but not. Yeah, I love fresh air. I'm getting fresh air from the south and the southwest today. I'm breathing it right now, Brian. It's fresh and clean. It's not coming from the refinery, which is to my east, which is. I woke up to a refinery, breathing refinery. That's no good. That's literally poison. And I know from the book that came out how much scrap that is. But yeah.
Okay, so from Clean Technica, solar clothing. This is a thing that's been around for a little bit, clothing that has solar panels on it. But I thought this was a really nice one. This is the Ecoflow Solar Hat. And it's just a wide-brimmed hat, which just makes a lot of sense in terms of putting solar panels on it. So I wouldn't get one of these because I don't spend enough time outdoors, but it blocks the sun and, it's enough juice to charge your phone. So you can order one now. It's called the Ecoflow Hat. It's going to be $129 US. There's a sort of pre-sale right now, so you can get it a bit cheaper. But this is the first time I saw, solar clothing that I saw, this really makes sense.
Yeah, these hats have cables coming out of them. It looks kind of funny, but they look like, just circular wide brim hats that are good for keeping the sun off of you and charging your phone, apparently. I don't know.
They could probably be a little better in terms of the design. They look slightly weird. So I think they could probably tweak the design and make them look a little bit better. But I think in most cases, you wouldn't look at it and think that that's a solar hat. It just looks like a wide brimmed hat.
Yeah, it's one of those things, though. I don't know. Like you say, get a Clean Energy Show hat and charge it home. You lazy bum. But because I'm thinking the only use case for this is like backcountry camping or hiking, and those people probably wouldn't want to wear a hat like that. I don't know, because you're running up against tree branches and things, and it's going to knock it off your head. But they do have, I believe they have solar backpacks, which are, panel. Yep. Plus they have little things now that you could just roll out and charge your phone with.
Flexible ones you can deploy. Yeah, those would be more juice.
So our friend in Ireland, Sean, God bless him, he tried to have a vacation and rent an EV. He doesn't own an EV. God knows he'd like to own an EV if he was a car person. Yeah, he tried to rent an EV at an airport in Dublin because he was going to take a trip. So let's read his letter here. It says, "Hi, Brian and James, just back from Wales, and I went to see the village, Port Marion, where they made The Prisoner." So, Brian, you were there, and you gave them tourism by talking about it, because now Sean went there.
I came all the way from Canada, and Sean was a lot closer, camping nearby. But if I've accomplished one thing on this podcast, I got more tourism to Port Marion. That's fantastic.
You can pat yourself on the back for that, and they should probably send you a T-shirt or something. He says, "I remember watching it when I was growing up as a kid, but it was not until Brian spoke about visiting it a few months ago that I thought of visiting it while staying in a campsite not 20 minutes away, and I'm glad I did. We had a great day out. I was not sure what the kids and wife thought about the whole thing, though, and the weather was fantastic. We all loved walking around the village," and he says it was like being in Italy for a few hours. I've never been to Italy. I can imagine what it would be like, though. I got an imagination. He says, "Anywho, I don't own an EV, but rented one from Hertz a few weeks ago to do a road trip within Ireland. Below is how I got on." He ran sort of his description through AI to make it funny. Yeah. I guess that's a thing you could do, but I don't know. We don't run our show through AI to make it funny. We run it through AI to make it less funny. Yeah. So we were itching to ditch the gas guzzler and try an electric vehicle on our trip from Dublin to Lisdoonvarna. Lisdoonvarna. That is how it is pronounced, but I looked on Wikipedia, and its Irish pronunciation is nothing like what I just said. So, and it's not something like I could even attempt. So Hertz prominently featured EVs on their website, boasting sleek Mercedes EVs, including, I forget we'll get to that in a second, the actual brand of Mercedes. The promise of a futuristic ride sealed the deal. And Hertz people, though, were not helpful, Brian. The friendly representative greeted us with a smile that vanished quicker than a free Wi-Fi signal on a plane. That's AI humor, by the way. Just so you know, a computer chip made that joke. The Clean Energy Show AI players will now dramatize the encounter that Sean and his wife had at the Hertz counter, and Brian AIU plays the evil Hertz manager.
Hello, renting an EV, are we? Where are you adventurers headed?
Lisdoonvarna.
Oh, the charger at your fancy destination might not speak the same language as this fancy electric car.
Don't worry, darling. We're practically whisperers. Plus, our destination has a charger, so it's all good vibes.
You-hoo, manager. They want the electric car and they're going to Lisdoonvarna. What do I do with them?
Talk them out of it.
Sean here, frequent listener of the Clean Energy Show podcast. Listen, Hertz idiots, can we just get the car we booked and hit the open road, electrically, of course?
With a sigh of relief that could power a small village, we got our EV, which in a delightful twist of fate ended up being a swanky EQE Mercedes, way better than the similar mystery machine that they were going to offer us. So guess what? Despite the initial concern of the manager's faulty crystal ball, we cruised into Lisdoonvarna with a over 30% battery left. And bonus points, we never even needed to stop the charge. And Brian, if they did, I looked at PlugShare.
Yeah.
This is not like my trip to Calgary. Like every 20 feet, there's a bloody charger, you know, like, yeah. And the Better Route Planner says that he would indeed use 70% of his battery to get there on the given conditions yesterday. So yeah, it's incredible. And there's even more chargers just off the highway, like, 5-10 minutes off the highway that he would have taken. And it's incredible. Like, it's just, we're a sparse, spread out country. I can't blame everything on our will to EVize the world, but it's kind of bad. So yeah, the distance from Dublin to Lisdoonvarna, for those keeping track at home, he says, or wearing tinfoil hats, is a breeze at roughly 255 kilometers. The moral of the story: Hertz maybe invest in some staff training on those fancy EVs. Which they haven't done. They've had them for a while, Brian.
Yeah. So I had a slightly different experience. I rented a Tesla from Hertz in Palm Springs, which I probably mentioned on the podcast, but it's California, right? So the thing that I thought was strange about the interaction is, first of all, we just booked it online. So it was already pre-booked and we got there and the guy just handed us the key card and let us walk away. Like no training whatsoever about what to do with an EV because it's California. He just probably assumed, oh, you booked it on the website. You know what a Tesla is. It's California. Off you go.
Okay. Well, Liz Dunvorna pronounced Leos Dune Björna or something like that.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Meaning Fort of the Gapped Keep. Fort of the Gapped Keep is the spa town in the County Clare in Ireland. That's is it on the West Coast, I think. The town is famous for its music and festivals, although the music festival was discontinued in the 1980s. The town still hosts its annual matchmaking festival each September. Sean, what's a matchmaking festival? It's not something we would have here. The population is 829. Yeah, 12 stations on the highway of his 250-kilometer trip, right on the highway, more just off the highway. Quite a... Thanks for writing, Sean, and I'm glad it worked out. So now you have the EV bug, and you know how... maybe overhyped some of these things are, but it's too bad that they discourage you from doing it because there's no reason to do it because, if you had destination charging, it's a win-win. Like what can go wrong? I'm
sure there's customers that are confused by the EV experience and need lots of help. And so, it's perhaps understandable, a reluctance on the part of the people because it just makes their job more difficult to have to explain things to people. But, that's unfortunate. Okay, from Electric Autonomy Canada, BYD is planning to enter the Canadian market. We talk a lot about BYD because they've up till now been basically kept out of North America. They've expanded to other parts of the world. The U.S., of course, has introduced huge tariffs on Chinese EVs to keep them out of the country. Canada has talked about doing something similar, but they haven't made a decision yet. So perhaps as a preemptive measure, BYD has made this announcement. And so I don't think any of these things are going to come to fruition anytime particularly soon, but they made an announcement saying that they're planning to enter the Canadian market with dealerships and vehicle sales. And then a couple days later, they announced a partnership with Uber. And this is not just for Canada, but many countries around the world where they operate. They're going to partner with Uber to offer 100,000 electric rideshare vehicles. So it remains to be seen what Canada's going to do about the BYD vehicles and if we're going to introduce tariffs to keep them out. BYD plans to lobby, basically. This is part of their announcement was to say that they're going to start lobbying the Canadian government, and it would be great for consumers because BYD is offering much, much cheaper electric vehicles that could drive the price down here in Canada. But we'll see if the government decides to keep them out. We do make vehicles here in Canada, but it's not quite like the situation in the U.S. where they're really protecting, Ford and GM and those major automakers. There's often plants for those in Canada, and we do make cars here, but a slightly different situation.
Yeah. And some of those 100,000 rideshare vehicles, EVs that they're making are going to South America and other places. So, it's a tricky, I don't want to offend auto workers or people who work in auto working economies, but we're going to talk a bit more about that later. What's really going on with the incumbent automakers? It's one point of view that I thought I would highlight. Actually, I'll highlight it right now because we're right there. This is the tweet of the week. This is from Nathaniel Horadam. He is a contract worker with the U.S. Department of Energy, had a very popular tweet thread, which I will read to you. Tesla scaling back EV ambitions, or more accurately, going completely sideways, meaning making things like the Cybertruck and the sports car, as opposed to making more mass adoption consumer vehicles, has hurt domestic EV adoption, as has Musk's brand damage, but there is little indication that Tesla's moves are impacting decisions at other OEMs. So there's been a bit of a slowdown in the growth of EVs, and the major automakers like Ford and GM are pulling back their ambitions quite drastically. So you had OEMs picking aggressive EV targets and making capital commitments to a nameplate capacity that would get them there, all before they mastered EV manufacturing and significantly streamlined engineering to reduce the costs. This is the advantage that Tesla has and that the Chinese automakers have is, one of their major goals was to reduce the cost of these vehicles to make them affordable because they were very expensive. Batteries were much more expensive when Tesla started out. So yeah, they were on that right away. But the OEMs, they're just chugging along with their gas cars and they're selling them and making money and all's going well. So they didn't, when they made EVs, they made them pretty expensive. And he says, so OEMs made bad extrapolations of a ZERP era consumer behavior piled into the upper price segments. Yeah, they made the luxury cars and that, they completely misread the market. So what sounded nice in the boardroom 3 to 4 years ago was not a sustainable course. So a recalibration was inevitable, he says. Tesla's pressure may be ebbing, but China's isn't. So, Tesla had a big influence. We could tell when they came out with announced pickup trucks after the Cybertruck announcement that was, spurring on. It would seem obvious to me that Tesla was putting pressure on the OEMs. And then now it says it's China. Western OEMs know that they need to build competitive EVs quickly to survive the onslaught of Chinese EVs that are coming. Scale is fundamental to the economics of more competitive vehicles, but making tens of thousands of uncompetitive vehicles helps no one. So what may look like retrenchment to some is really a more nuanced approach that scales back growth targets in the short term while rapidly learning how to make competitive EVs through better engineering, procurement, and manufacturing. If you look closely at what the OEMs are actually doing and listen to their CEOs, you see no lessened urgency. So this is a positive note, positive take on what the OEMs are doing, that they're actually just retrenching and reapproaching things to be competitive, and they're not backing away entirely.
Yeah, and the U.S. automakers, they've got a window now of a few years with these protections to keep Chinese vehicles out. So hopefully they can turn it around and actually make competitive profitable EVs in the next few years. I don't know if they can keep the Chinese cars out forever.
And let's dip into the mailbag once again, Brian.
All right, so here we go. The letter says, "Hi, James and Brian. Love this week's show as always. I just heard this Redefining Energy podcast below about Bill Gates and his stubborn adherence to his nuclear religion, while the world has completely moved on and solar and wind are winning. When I heard in your podcast that the amount of wind, solar, and batteries waiting in queue to connect to the grid is double our current energy production from all sources, I was strongly convinced that solar, wind, and batteries have clearly won the race. Although I was convinced a long time ago, it's just now that I have a strong data point to confirm my suspicions. This discussion also made me think about the future of Form Energy's iron-air batteries. This is an alternative battery technology that got some press, more like a few years ago. When they announced that the product could be installed at an installed cost of $20 per kilowatt hour, I was very excited. I told everyone I knew about it and thought it could be my ticket to free myself from the monopoly utilities by going off-grid. Then a short while back, I heard, again on your show, that one of the big Chinese battery manufacturers announced they would be providing batteries to car makers at $54 per kilowatt hour. At that point, it became clear to me that Form Energy's technology will be dead on arrival. The LFP technology manufactured by the Chinese is a proven technology and is far superior in terms of specs. So, if it's $54 a kilowatt hour now, it won't be long before it dips below the $20 per kilowatt hour installed cost. Also, Form Energy hasn't gotten a single pilot project up and running yet, as far as I know. If you're in this business, you've got to be looking over your shoulder at all times. You never know what's coming for you. Keep up the fantastic work. Eric.
Thank you, Eric, for writing us. We love to hear from our listeners. Contact us at cleanenergyshow, all one word, at gmail.com. That's the best way to get us. You can also DM us on various social media platforms, but sometimes it takes a while for me to find those. And you can also leave us a voicemail online. Our favorite thing, speakpipe.com/clean energy.
Yeah. And I listened to that Redefining Energy podcast as well. And a guy basically took a look at the portfolio from, Gates has a venture capital firm that's investing money in clean energy sources. And according to the analysis of the guy on the podcast, it's about 52% of it is good and useful. And there's like 14% that's kind of iffy. And then whatever the leftover is, 32% that's really just not going to work. Like, I'm not a fusion scientist, but it seems like fusion is always many decades away and just way too expensive. And it's, the fund is invested in that and things like carbon capture. So, solar, wind, and batteries, it's proven technology. It's already cheap and getting cheaper.
I don't know why he can't see that. Like he said, it's impossible for a semi-trailer to be electric a few years ago, and he was wrong about that. And we're seeing that those are actually on the highways working, and they'll get batteries soon that'll be twice the energy density and half the cost. And so what's going to stop them?
No, and usually it's governments that are tending to make these poor decisions because governments don't like to pick winners and losers, so they're spreading the money around. Maybe it's hydrogen, maybe
it's a waste of
nuclear.
money, some of the things they're doing, though. It's crazy.
It's unfortunate, but I think that venture capital fund, it has something to do with the fact that it was set up like about 20 years ago, maybe not quite 20. And, it was a little less sure back then if solar, wind, and batteries were going to be the answer. Well, it's clear now, and they need to change course.
So the one thing that is possibly moving nuclear in the Western world is actually data centers, AI data centers that will have what they call behind the fence a generation where it doesn't connect to the grid. You have a nuclear reactor just for Microsoft's data center or Google or Amazon or whatever. And then it's just that. So I don't know. Like it's when governments basically have to get onto the nuclear because it's not the investment's not there. They don't want to take the risk. Investors are not taking the government has to back up these projects. And I don't know what parts of the world that isn't true, but it seems like in all parts of the world it seems to be true. And when that happens, then it's kind of like just a waste of money, perhaps. But if they're using the money, they're using all the electricity just for themselves, they can factor that in and they can waste their own money. I don't care. But there may be better ways of doing it. Yeah,
and there was a story recently, a nuclear plant in Texas tripped offline because of a fire in the yard or something of the plant. So the reactor trips offline and batteries save the day. And, it's this ongoing myth that nuclear and maybe even coal are this steady baseline power. And it's like, well, most of the time, except when they're not, So lots of arguments that solar, wind, and batteries are really the answer. It already works. Okay, from The Guardian here. Wildfire smoke may increase the risk of dementia. This is the depressing story of the week. This is the other reason that you should get air conditioning in your house if there's a lot of wildfire smoke. You don't want to be breathing the smoke. They've done the correlation with the numbers, and it looks like, dementia has increased in areas where people are being exposed to a lot of smoke.
Is that right? Dementia. That's just what I need.
Yep.
It's becoming more evident every week on the show. That sucks because we never used to have smoke here as much as we do, and we don't have a lot of forests burning here. It's more in the two provinces to our west towards the coast that are burning.
We're a few hundred miles away from any forests, and yet we're suffering from it.
Yeah, and our skies aren't blue in the summer, and we need our summer. I've said it before. What's the point of living here if we don't have a decent summer, Brian? I don't know. The only good reason other than relatively cheap housing. So there's been a major climate action move out of China. They have set hard targets for overall emissions from 2026 on. This is notable because China has already hit peak emissions this year, 6 years ahead of its 2030 goal. Hard targets will accelerate its decarbonation, even though things are going pretty well now. All things considered, because it's such a fast-growing economy, hard targets will accelerate its decarbonization as it continues to add 5 large nuclear power plants in new renewables every week. This is from Bloomberg. China is planning a shift in the way it aims to control greenhouse gases, favoring hard targets for total carbon emissions over its current method of just measuring them against economic growth, which is kind of what we kind of do around here a lot. China, the world's biggest source of planet warming pollution, has for years set targets that aim to reduce energy use or emissions per unit of gross domestic product, a system it refers to as intensity. And that approach has allowed China to tout environmental successes even as its total emissions soared, kind of what the oil sands does. So as long as they didn't grow faster than the overall economy, and if you want to read more, that story is on Bloomberg. And quickly, another story for you here from China. Xpeng Motors has started rolling out its version of full self-driving to be available on all roads to all users in China, targeting door-to-door experience in Q4. This is something that rivals Tesla's full self-driving beta because of the nature of the AI that it uses, and I think it uses some vision as well. So its AI-powered self-driving in its cars is going into all of its cars after many months of beta testing. Has accumulated 7.5 million kilometers of testing this year, and it actually became available on all roads in China at the beginning of this year, but Xpeng spent more than half a year conducting large-scale real-world tests to ensure driving safety. We are keeping an eye on self-driving autonomous vehicles, and China is one of the question marks. How are they? Well, this is a bit of information I thought I would discuss on this week's show. The AI chauffeur feature has been able to allow vehicles to pass through toll booths automatically, and they expect that by the fourth quarter of this year, coming up not too long, they'll be able to also handle parking lot gates and internal campus roads for a true door-to-door experience. At the beginning of 2026, the number of security takeovers and efficiency takeovers for the system will be significantly reduced, allowing users to truly enjoy using the feature. The company said over-the-air updates has seen one version iteration every 2 days and one experience upgrade every 2 weeks. This is a serious drive to automation by having all these updates. Since its debut on May 20th, the OS has accumulated 5 updates in 70 days, enabling at least 35 version iterations, outpacing the mobile industry and others. So that's just something I thought I would throw in. We'll keep an eye on how China is doing with full self-driving. It's time for the lightning round.
The lightning round is a fast-paced look at the latest headlines in climate, clean energy, and transportation.
Wind and solar generated 58% of the Netherlands' electricity in June 2024. That's double the June of just 3 years ago. And here where we live, we have better solar resources than the Netherlands, lots of space, and are doing butkus about it. And we could be, and they are expanding. We could be doing that, but we're not because we're idiots here. Saskatchewan, Canada, in case you're wondering, new to the show. Lion Electric has cut 30% of its workforce, pauses construction on factories amid slower EV demand. They are a Canadian company that has started with school buses, but I believe they also make trucks, like larger transport vehicles as well. A Porsche Taycan wirelessly charged at a rate of 270 kilowatts, setting a new record. But the car is a prototype. Green Car Reports has that story. Interesting. I think maybe, I know there's a wireless highway that stretch that debuted somewhere in the world recently that I was reading about this morning, but I don't get it. Just plug in and charge overnight. Like, unless you're a bus that has a route and you need to add some stuff at a stop or something for 10 minutes, that's different. I don't know. Zeekr follows NIO in piloting the use of humanoid robots. That's a Chinese automaker. The CNEV Post has that story. So yeah, they're putting humanoid robots that look like humans to do tasks that humans don't want to do. It's not to be confused with your normal auto factory robots, which are whatever.
Yeah. So AI humanoid robots will be doing this podcast by 2030.
I'm not sure. Well, do you really know I'm real, Brian? Can you absolutely verify that I'm real? We
haven't done this podcast in person for like 3 years, so maybe not.
Maybe we should do that sometime. Just do the podcast and see if there's a different vibe to it. I know the chairs are uncomfortable, so I'm not going to commit to doing it on a regular basis, but, one time would be fun. Oh, it's time for a CS Fast Fact. A North American consumes today 16 times more energy than an African. So 16 times more energy is consumed by North American individuals, and mostly still from burning fossil fuel and coal. That is from visualcapitalist.com. Oh, it's time for an oil ban.
Oil ban.
Chile is going to phase out petrol cars in 2035 for cars and 2045 for interurban buses. That's buses that go outside the city, and cargo transport vehicles. So that's good. Way to go, Chile. Grid shortages fuel China's small-scale solar boom. Small-scale distributed PV has become a significant part of the world's biggest solar market, but is now butting up against the same grid constraints that have constrained solar utility big farms. You have too much solar utility farms, and suddenly the grid can't handle all of them because it is variable. And now so many homes have solar that the grids are starting to choke on that solar because there's so much of it, because it's so cheap that it's expanding too fast.
Yeah, tons of solar panel production in China.
BYD is investing retail and rideshare opportunities to put its passenger vehicles in Canada. We covered that earlier on the show. For more, you can read about some of that on electricautonomycanada.ca. EV share of total new car sales in the People's Republic of China. This is the sales of new cars that are EVs. In 2020, 6%, and this year, the first half, 47%. Basically,
wow,
50% saturation in China. when we started the podcast 4.5 years ago, I was excited, and then I was a little bit unexcited about China's EV adoption because they took away incentives and things started to slow down a little bit. Well, they're rocking along. So half of new car sales in June, I think, were 49.9%. So there you go, 50% in the largest auto market. And that's up 23%. Battery-only electric vehicles were 55%, and plug-in hybrids were 45% of June EV sales. That's still a little high for the plug-in hybrids, but they have a good selection of them there. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, boo if you want now, comments on EVs last week. Surprisingly, he says this is coming whether we like it or not. Consumers, particularly those young people like us, young'uns like us, Brian, are into this. So, yeah. Amazon EV milestone of 15,000 electric vehicle vans in service right now. They're trying to get to 100,000 Amazon vans by 2030. And finally this week, the share of European consumers who said their next vehicle will be all electric has not changed over the past 3 years. It's 43% of them said their next vehicle will be electric. But get this, Brian, in China, buyers answering the same question rose to 97%. So 97% of Chinese consumers said that their next vehicle will be electric. That is incredible, and that's where you can see that is going to continue. You can read about that on political.eu, and that is it.
And that's our show for this week. You can contact us at cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Around social media, we're Clean Energy Pod. And you can find videos of our show on TikTok and YouTube, including special content not featured on the podcast.
Yeah, the video version is released on the weekend following the audio version. And we have a Clean Energy store where you can buy non-solar hats in your show notes, hats, t-shirts, mugs, all that stuff. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you are a decent person, you will do that for us. Thank you. And donate with PayPal to keep us podcasting. Link there is in your show notes. If you're new to the show, remember to subscribe on your app if you haven't already, because we put this out every week, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.